The snow was still falling when Lydia lifted the crystal decanter, her smile sweet enough to rot the air. Candlelight flickered across her earrings, scattering gold over the tablecloth. "You should rest, Dad," she said, voice dripping concern. "We'll handle everything now." She poured the red wine slowly into my glass. The scent was familiar, Pinot Noir from Oregon, but the look in her eyes wasn't. For a moment I saw something cold and deliberate behind that sweetness, the kind of look I'd seen from business rivals right before they tried to take my company apart. I glanced down at the glass, saw the faint swirl of bubbles too many for a still wine. That was the moment I knew this Christmas dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a transaction. I smiled, lifted my glass and said softly, "You've earned a toast, Lydia." Then I placed my glass down and nudged it toward her. "But you should drink first." She laughed a little too high-pitched, then touched her lips to the rim. Around us, the table glittered with polished silverware, the roast turkey steaming between garlands of pine. My son Nathan raised his fork pretending everything was fine. He'd always hated conflict, always chosen silence over truth. Tonight was no different. When Lydia swallowed, I watched closely. She set the glass down, smile trembling just a bit. I leaned back in my chair and let the sound of carols drift in from the living room. Everything she'd said it so easily. The house, the company, the $1.8 million still left in my account after 40 years of sweat and steel. She thought I didn't notice the tension between her fingers or the way she avoided looking me in the eye. She thought age had dulled me. Across the table, my granddaughter Emma giggled, asking for more mashed potatoes. Lydia served her with a perfect hostess's grin. "Eat up, sweetheart. Grandpa's going to finally take it easy after this." After this. The phrase clung to the air. I lifted my fork, pretended to taste the turkey, and said, "Maybe I will." The evening blurred into laughter and empty pleasantries. My friends from the old firm had left after dessert. Only family remained. Lydia insisted on refilling my glass again and again, ignoring my hand over the rim. "Just a little more," she urged. "It's Christmas after all." I nodded, pretending not to notice that she never finished her own drink. Nathan kept checking his phone under the table. Every few minutes, his thumb flicked the screen, his face tightening. From where I sat, I could see a message preview flash once funds cleared. That was all I needed to see. I excused myself before the coffee came out. In the hallway mirror, my reflection stared back, 68 years old, a little slower, climbing stairs, but still sharper than the people who thought they could outplay me. I'd built Harrison Sons Construction from nothing but a rusted truck and 2 good hands. I'd survived recessions, lawsuits, and competitors who'd sell their souls to bury me. Compared to that, a scheming daughter-in-law didn't scare me. From the kitchen doorway, I watched Lydia load the dishwasher with mechanical precision. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "You've outdone yourself." She smiled without turning around. "Just doing what's best for the family, Dad." I studied her back, rigid, efficient, confident. I'd seen that kind of confidence before, the kind that came right before a crash. Upstairs, I hung my suit jacket, checked the safe hidden behind the bookshelf, still locked untouched. For now. Then I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. My email inbox was flooded with notifications from the company's accounts files marked authorization fund release pending signature. Lydia had been busy. I clicked one at random and felt my stomach tighten. Each transfer request was labeled under a new consulting firm, Northland Advisory, LLC. I'd never heard of it. A quick search confirmed what I already suspected. It had been registered 2 months ago in Olympia under Lydia's name. Downstairs, I heard her laughing, too loud, too light for someone supposedly tired from hosting. Nathan's voice joined hers, low, nervous. Their conversation blurred into fragments. Final transfer. "Dad won't notice. End of quarter." I closed the laptop and turned off the lamp. My pulse stayed steady, but my mind was already moving fast. I'd seen this pattern before in mergers, where one partner slowly cut the other's access until the takeover was complete. Lydia was treating me like a business deal, a hostile acquisition wrapped in family dinner. At midnight, I went back down for water. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon. Lydia's wine glass was still half full on the counter. I picked it up, held it to the light. A faint film clung to the inside, a residue too cloudy for a clean pour. My jaw tightened. She'd been sloppy. I poured it down the sink, rinsed the glass, and dried it carefully. If she wanted to play subtle, I'd play smarter. The next morning, the snow outside had hardened into glassy ice. Lydia was already in the kitchen, dressed for errands, hair perfect. "Morning, Dad," she chirped. "Nathan and I are heading to the office. We'll handle payroll, bonuses, all that messy stuff. You just relax." "Bonuses? I stirred my coffee slowly. "You're transferring funds today?" She blinked quick, but not quick enough. "Just small things. Year-end stuff." I smiled. "Good. I like to see initiative." When they left, I waited 10 minutes, then went to my study. The second laptop, my private one, was still connected to the company server. I opened the financial dashboard. There it was, a new transfer request, $480,000 to Sunset Haven Retirement Community. I stared at the screen. A retirement home. For me? A dry laugh escaped my throat. Clever, Lydia. Very clever. Poison the old man, make him seem confused, then move him into care for his safety. Once declared incompetent, his assets would go to his guardians, Nathan and Lydia. I reached for the phone and called the one man who'd been with me longer than any employee. "James," I said, when his calm voice answered. "I think my family just tried to retire me permanently." A pause. "Then, Edward, I assume you have evidence working on it. Then let's meet tomorrow. Same office?" I hung up and leaned back, staring at the snow through the window. The world outside looked clean, untouched, honest. I wondered how many people sitting in cozy houses tonight were hiding knives behind smiles. At noon, Nathan texted. Everything went smoothly. "Lydia says hi." I typed back, "Tell her she did great." Dinner was unforgettable. That evening, the house was quiet again. The dining table still set from last night, empty plates, leftover candles, the faint scent of wine. I poured myself a fresh glass from a sealed bottle, swirled it, and watched the light catch the surface. Last night, she thought she'd given me my last drink. Tonight, I drank to my own survival. The liquid burned warm down my throat, steady and sharp, like clarity. I sat at the table where Lydia had smiled and Nathan had looked away. I could still hear her voice. "We'll handle everything now." I laughed quietly to myself. "Yes, you will," I said aloud. "Exactly the way I want you to." Outside, the snow fell thicker. In the reflection of the window, I saw my own eyes, calm, calculating the way they'd been decades ago in boardrooms full of liars in tailored suits. I wasn't a victim. Not then, not now. This time, the battle wasn't for contracts or clients. It was for blood and legacy. I turned off the lights, locked the front door, and headed upstairs, mind clear, heart steady. The trap had already begun forming. By the time Christmas lights flickered out across the neighborhood, I was wide awake in the dark, writing notes in a leather-bound journal. At the top of the page, I wrote one line in neat, precise letters, Phase 1. Let them believe they've already won. The morning after Christmas, the house felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were keeping secrets. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Lydia had poured my wine 2 nights ago. The sunlight through the window hit the glass cabinet, glinting off the rim of a single untouched wine glass I'd left there on purpose. I studied it while sipping coffee, remembering her words, soft, rehearsed, fake concern wrapped in sugar. "You should rest, Dad. We'll handle everything now. Everything." The words still rang in my head like a bell. I replayed every moment from that dinner, the hesitation in her eyes, the twitch of her wrist when she poured the wine, the way she smiled too quickly when I offered to let her drink first. I'd seen that look before in boardrooms, when someone realized their deal might fall apart. Fear pretending to be confidence. I hadn't survived 40 years in business by ignoring details. Lydia thought of me as an aging man easier to manipulate than to respect. That would be her first mistake. When Nathan and Lydia came downstairs, I was already dressed, reading the morning paper. Nathan looked half awake. Lydia was radiant, her perfume lingering even before she entered the room. She kissed my cheek lightly. "We're heading to the office, Dad. Big payroll day." I folded the paper. "You two seem busy lately." "Year-end accounting," she said quickly. "Nothing to worry about." Nathan nodded without meeting my eyes. "You've earned a break, Dad. Relax. We'll take care of the business side." I smiled faintly. "Of course, you two have everything under control." As they left, Lydia added cheerfully, "Don't touch the accounts, all right?" I already transferred some funds for bonuses. When the door closed, I waited a full minute before I stood up. Then I walked into my study, opened my second laptop, and logged into the company server. The cursor blinked while the system loaded. Old instincts returned the thrill of a hunt, the calm before exposure. I searched through the company's transaction records. New accounts appeared that hadn't existed a month ago. One stood out, Northland Consulting LLC. Money had been trickling there every week, amounts small enough to avoid suspicion, but large enough to add up over time. Scrolling deeper, I found one more entry, Sunset Haven Retirement Community Entry Fee, $480,000. I stared at it for a long time. A retirement home, for me. They weren't even subtle. I leaned back in my chair, let out a slow breath, and almost laughed. Lydia wasn't planning for my comfort. She was planning for my removal. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, Mr. Harris, this is Laura from accounting. I've been told not to send you certain reports, but I think you should see them. Please call me, Laura Chen. I remembered the name, one of the junior accountants Lydia had hired last quarter. Quiet girl, hard-working. I called her immediately. Her voice trembled. "Mr. Harris, I hope I'm not overstepping. Mrs. Harris said those reports were confidential, but some numbers don't make sense." "What kind of numbers?" "There are payments labeled as consulting fees, but they're going to a shell company. The same name keeps showing up, Northland Consulting." I smiled into the receiver. "You did the right thing, Laura. Don't mention this to anyone. I'll handle it." When we hung up, I stared out the window. Snow was still falling soft and slow, covering the garden like a clean slate. The world outside looked calm. Inside, a storm was already brewing. By noon, I called James Porter. He picked up on the first ring. "Morning, Ed. You sound early. I found something. Lydia's running money through a dummy company, and there's a transfer to a retirement home. My name's on it." There was a pause, then the faint scrape of his chair. "We'll meet today. Bring everything you have." At 4 o'clock, I drove downtown through slush and gray sky. James's office smelled of leather and old paper, the kind of place where truth felt heavier than lies. He listened without interrupting as I laid out every detail, the poisoned wine, the transfers, the fake sweetness. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "It's a classic power grab. Make you seem unfit, gain financial control, then move assets quietly." I nodded. "They think I won't fight back. Then don't fight. Document." "Document," he smiled thinly. "Let them act. You watch record and let me do the legal work. We'll build this case brick by brick." I grinned. "Just like the old days." As I left, James added, "And Ed, keep them thinking you're tired, weak. That's when people show their greed." That night, the house glowed with Christmas lights Lydia hadn't bothered to take down. I sat by the window, notebook in hand, writing down every suspicious thing I could remember. Nathan's evasive glances, Lydia's insistence on controlling my accounts, her overeager hospitality. The list filled 2 pages before I stopped. At 9, Nathan called. "Dad, Lydia says you're worried about the finances. Everything's fine, really." "I'm sure it is," I said calmly. "I trust my family." He hesitated. "We love you, Dad. We just want you safe." "Of course. Safety first." When the call ended, I felt something break quietly inside me. Not anger, not fear, just the recognition that my own son believed I was too old to see what was right in front of me. The next morning I moved carefully. No accusations, no sudden moves. I acted exactly how Lydia wanted: agreeable, distracted content to let others handle things. While she and Nathan worked at the office, I had a security company install cameras around the house, discreet, cloud-connected and recording audio. When the technician asked why I needed them, I said, "Package thefts. It's getting bad in the neighborhood." He nodded, no questions asked. By the time they came home that evening, everything was in place. Dinner was quiet. Lydia chatted about a wonderful new opportunity at the company, how the new fiscal year would bring fresh leadership. I pretended to listen, nodding occasionally, the perfect image of an aging man who'd given up. When she mentioned I should visit a doctor for routine cognitive evaluation, I almost smiled. "So that was next. Paint me as senile." "I already made an appointment," I said casually. "Dr. Milton downtown." I thought it was time for a checkup. Lydia froze for just half a second. "Oh, that's good. It's always better to have documentation." Her voice betrayed her. She was nervous. She didn't expect me to take initiative. "Documentation's important." I agreed, meeting her eyes. "Helps people know who's really competent." The rest of the meal passed in silence. Nathan kept staring at his plate. Later that night, I replayed the camera footage on my phone. At one point, Lydia leaned toward Nathan in the kitchen, whispering, "He said he's seeing a doctor. We can use that. Once we get the report, it'll be easier to move him." Nathan didn't answer. He just rubbed his face and muttered, "Let's just finish this." That was enough. I didn't need any more proof of what they were planning. I turned off the lights, went to my study, and took out the journal where I'd written my first note, Phase 1. I flipped to the next page and wrote in steady block letters, Phase 2, make them believe they've already won. Outside, snow drifted under the lamplight. The world looked peaceful again. But I'd learned long ago that peace was just another word for silence before the strike. Lydia wanted control. She'd get control of the rope that would hang her plans. And I would be there calm as ever to hand her the pen. 3 days after Christmas, the world outside was quiet, too quiet for a house that had just survived an attempted betrayal. The snow along the driveway had hardened into glassy sheets, untouched, except for the tire tracks Nathan and Lydia left every morning. I woke before dawn, made black coffee, and went down to the basement office. The faint hum of the old desktop filled the silence. I'd spent decades in this room drafting contracts, negotiating deals, outsmarting men twice my age. Now I was preparing for the most personal negotiation of my life. The folder named Bonuses 2023 still sat on my screen like a taunt. I clicked it open again. Line after line of small, careful transfers, all perfectly legal on the surface. But the patterns were wrong. Each week, exactly $9,750 moved from Harris & Sons to Northland Consulting LLC. Just under the $10,000 mark that triggers automatic federal reporting. Clever, Lydia. Not clever enough. I pulled up another account, a new credit line taken under the company's name, signed by E. Harris in digital ink. The signature was mine, but not quite. The curve on the YAR was off too symmetrical. Lydia must have used one of the digital documents I'd signed months ago to forge it. By 7, I had a folder of evidence printed and sealed in a brown envelope. Across the front, I wrote in pen Phase 1, Proof of Intent. When the phone rang, I knew who it was before answering. "Good morning, James." "Ed, you sound like a man who hasn't slept." "I sleep fine," I said. Though we both knew I didn't. Found more. Transfers, forged signatures, even a dummy firm. "Bring it," he said. "I'll meet you at the cafe in Ballard. The one with the bad coffee and good privacy." By 9, the sky was gray and low. The kind of Seattle morning that made everything look washed in nickel. James was waiting at a corner table, a manila folder of his own already open. He didn't bother with small talk. "You were right," he said. "Sunset Haven confirmed a deposit under your name made by Lydia Harris. She listed herself as next of kin and legal contact, which gives her the right to sign medical and financial decisions." He nodded grimly. "Classic setup. They declare you incompetent, move you into care, then handle your estate for your protection. Within a month, your assets disappear." I leaned back, the words calm but deliberate. "We're not letting that happen." James smiled faintly. "No, we're not." We spent the next hour planning every move. Cameras already installed. Document backups encrypted. Then James suggested something that made me pause. "You need an independent psychiatric evaluation, Ed. A record proving full cognitive capacity. If they ever try to challenge your mental state, that document buries them." I chuckled. "So you want me to outsmart them on paper?" "That's your specialty," he said. By the time I left, the plan had solid bones. I drove home through light snow, the radio muttering soft jazz while my mind ran numbers like it used to in the old days. If Lydia thought I was fading, she was about to learn how clear an old man's mind could be. That evening, as I shoveled the walk, Nathan's car pulled up. He stepped out holding a paper bag from a bakery. "Thought you might like something sweet," he said. His eyes were bloodshot, his smile forced. I let him in. Inside, Lydia wasn't with him. That was interesting. He poured coffee while I unwrapped the pastries. "How's retirement treating you, Dad?" I looked at him. Quiet. Maybe too quiet. "You two seem busier than ever." "Lots of projects starting next quarter," he said quickly. "Lydia's got the accounting handled." "I'm sure she does." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Tell me, son, you trust her with everything now?" He hesitated. "She's good with numbers." "Numbers, yes. People, not so much." He stiffened. "Dad," I cut him off gently. "I'm not accusing Nathan, just asking." He glanced away, rubbing the back of his neck. "You've been through a lot. Maybe you're just overthinking." I smiled, the kind of smile that used to make board members sweat, maybe. "But you know what overthinking built? This house, that company, your paycheck." He had no answer. When he left, I watched him pull out his phone the second he stepped outside, his breath fogging the cold air. Probably texting her. Probably saying he's getting suspicious. Good. Let them worry. Fear makes people sloppy. The next morning, I called in a favor from one of James's tech contacts, a young security specialist named Mark. He arrived with a backpack full of small devices. Within 2 hours, he'd installed micro cameras in the kitchen, the hallway, and my office. Each one streamed to a private server. "What do I tell my family when they notice new cameras?" I asked. "Package theft," Mark said with a grin. "It's Seattle. Everyone buys that." When he left, I sat in my office watching the live feed. For the first time, I could see my house from every angle. The battlefield was mapped. That night, I got my first recording worth keeping. Lydia stood in the kitchen whispering into her phone while Nathan washed dishes. "He's calmer than I expected," she said softly. "Good. The less he questions things, the faster we can finalize the transfer." Nathan didn't look up. What if he changes his mind about Sunset Haven? He won't. Once we have power of attorney, he won't be able to. Her tone was casual cold. I watched the video twice, the second time in silence. Then I copied it to a secure folder labeled Evidence. The next morning, I left an envelope on the dining table open, just enough for Lydia to see when she came in. Inside was a printed email confirmation, appointment with Dr. Milton. Cognitive evaluation, Jan 3, 10 a.m. She read it while pretending to clean the counter. "You're seeing a doctor?" she asked. "Routine checkup," I said, pouring coffee. "People my age should have proof we're still competent." Her hand froze mid-wipe. "That's good. Paperwork helps?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "It does." That evening, she called Nathan into the kitchen again. "My cameras caught everything. He's going for an evaluation," she hissed. "If the report says he's fine, we can't file for guardianship." Nathan sounded defeated. "Then what?" "Wait until he actually gets sick." "No," she said. "We'll push the financial side now. Once he signs those consolidation papers, it won't matter what the doctor says." I paused the video halfway through, leaned back and let out a slow breath. She wasn't just reckless, she was desperate. Before bed, I opened my journal and flipped to the page I'd marked Phase 2. I drew a thin line beneath it and wrote in bold letters, "Phase 3, give them the rope." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and soundless. Through the glass, I could see my reflection, an old man perhaps, but one still sharp enough to measure every move before striking. I closed the journal, turned off the lamp, and whispered to the empty room. "You wanted control, Lydia. You'll have it right up until it strangles you." The clock ticked steady and slow. Upstairs, the house creaked as the wind pushed against it, a sound I'd heard for decades. But this time it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like preparation. Tomorrow the trap would start closing, and by the time they realized, it would already be too late. I hadn't stepped inside Harris & Sons in months, but the smell hit me the moment I walked through the glass doors, fresh concrete coffee printer toner, and something new, fear. The receptionist froze when she saw me, then fumbled a greeting. "Mr. Harris, we weren't expecting you." I know I said, smiling, as if I'd just stopped by to hand out candy. "Thought I'd see how the old place is doing." Her eyes darted toward the inner office. Within seconds, whispers started rippling down the hall. Lydia must have trained them well, never tell the old man anything without her approval. I didn't need an appointment. I walked straight to the accounting wing. The company had changed. My framed blueprints were gone, replaced with motivational posters Lydia must have ordered online. Modernize, monetize, maximize. The irony almost made me laugh. Behind the glass partition sat a young woman I hadn't met before, typing furiously at her keyboard. "Laura Chen," I asked. She jumped. "Oh, Mr. Harris, I didn't know you were coming." "Good," I said. Keeps everyone honest. I stepped closer. "Mind if I see last quarter's expense summaries?" "Old habit." Her eyes flicked nervously toward the inner door, the one that led to Lydia's office. "Mrs. Harris said not to." "Mrs. Harris," I interrupted gently, "doesn't own this company. Not legally, not yet." Laura hesitated, then opened a drawer and slid a folder across the desk. "You didn't get this from me." "I never do," I said and opened it. The numbers leapt off the page. Consulting fees. Northland Consulting LLC, $240,000 in the last quarter alone. My jaw tightened. I turned another page. Unverified vendor payments, private retainer adjustments. Lydia had built an entire shadow payroll. Before I could thank Laura, I heard the sharp clack of heels behind me. Lydia's perfume hit before her voice did. "Dad?" she said sweetly, stepping into the office. What a surprise. I closed the folder slowly and smiled. "Just visiting. I missed the chaos." She walked over, resting a manicured hand on Laura's desk. "Laura, why don't you take an early lunch?" Laura froze. "Oh, now," Lydia said, still smiling. The girl hurried out, nearly tripping on her way. Lydia turned back to me, her eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here, Dad. You're supposed to be resting." I leaned on the desk, casual. "And miss all this fun, I was just admiring your creativity." "Northland Consultings, it sounds expensive." Her face didn't change, but I saw her pupils contract. "We've been outsourcing some of the back-end work. Normal business practice." I nodded. "Sure. And 240,000 is just petty cash, right?" Her smile cracked for half a second before she caught herself. "You shouldn't worry about that. We'll handle it." There it was again. "We'll handle it." The phrase that meant, "We'll take it from here, old man." "Well," I said, picking up the folder, "if you're handling things, I'd better see how well." She reached out to grab the folder, but I stepped back too quick for her. The look on her face was priceless. "Relax," I said. "You'll get your copy?" Her jaw tightened. "Dad, please, I know you're under a lot of stress. Why don't you go home? I'll bring the files by later." "I'll save you the trip," I said, heading for the door. "Drive safe, Lydia." I didn't look back, but I could feel her glare on the back of my neck. Outside, I exhaled. My pulse was steady, my steps even. 40 years of negotiation had taught me one thing: never show victory too early. By evening, I was at James's office again. He scanned the documents, nodding slowly. "Good work, Ed. This is enough to start freezing accounts if we have to." "Not yet," I said. "She's still too careful. I want her to feel invincible first." He leaned back, smiling. "You're enjoying this?" "Not the way you think," I said. "I'm teaching her a lesson she won't forget." James poured 2 fingers of scotch into my glass. "So what's next to test?" I said. "Let's see how far she'll go once she thinks she's safe." We mapped it out. James would create a fake fund, Harris Trust Legacy Fund, a small family investment portfolio designed to look like a new account I'd set up. If Lydia tried to move that money, it would trigger an automatic alert and record her credentials. By the time I left, the city was dark wet with rain instead of snow. I drove home in silence. Nathan's car was already in the driveway. Inside, he sat at the kitchen table, head down. The smell of coffee hung in the air. "Son," I greeted. He looked up, tired. "Dad, Lydia said you came to the office." "I did. She's upset. She thinks you don't trust her." "Should I?" I asked. "Dad?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "She's trying to help. She's keeping things organized. By moving company funds into private accounts." His head snapped up. "What? No, she'd never." "She did." Nathan stared at me, speechless. I softened my voice. "You're a good man's son, but you let her think for you. That's not help, that's control." He stood abruptly, eyes glassy. "You're wrong. You're paranoid." "Maybe," I said quietly. "Or maybe you're too scared to see what's right in front of you." He stormed out, slamming the door. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for a long minute before driving off. The headlights cut across the snow, then vanished into the dark. I didn't feel anger, just the familiar ache of disappointment. Betrayal doesn't hurt because it surprises you. It hurts because you saw it coming and hoped you were wrong. Later that night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Harris, I think I made a mistake. Lydia noticed I printed that report. I might lose my job." "Laura," I replied immediately. "Meet me at the Ballard Cafe, same corner booth. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She looked pale when I arrived, clutching a USB drive like a lifeline. "I copied the accounting data before Lydia deleted the originals," she whispered. "She's been altering the retirement fund reports, 2 redirecting payments to Northland." "How much?" "Almost $500,000. I took the USB. You did the right thing, Laura. Go home. If anyone asks, you never met me. She nodded, tears welling. Thank you, sir. I watched her leave before sliding the USB into my pocket. Outside, snow had started falling again, thick, deliberate flakes under the streetlights. Back home, I plugged it into my laptop. The data opened instantly. Names, accounts, false invoices. There it was, the proof of what Lydia had been building. Not just theft. A full-scale financial execution plan. If I died, everything would have been liquidated within weeks. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I poured a small glass of bourbon, lifted it toward the monitor, and whispered, "You almost pulled it off." I saved the files under a new folder, Phase 2. The bait. Tomorrow I'd send James a copy. By the time Lydia realized what was happening, the trap would already be tightening. I closed the laptop and turned off the light. The house was silent, but the silence didn't bother me anymore. Through the window, snow kept falling soft and relentless, just like me. Rain swept across the city the next morning, turning the snow into gray slush. I drove downtown, early windshield wipers thudding like a metronome. The air inside James Porter's office smelled of leather and old cigars, a place built for secrets and strategy. He looked up from his desk, already knowing why I was there. "You brought it?" he asked. I set the folder down between us. Everything. Transfers, shell accounts, fake invoices. She's good too. Good for someone who only learned accounting 5 years ago. James flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. She planned this like a hostile takeover. Not sloppy, not emotional, but she underestimated the oldest rule in business. Never write down something you don't want discovered. She didn't just write it down, I said. She built a trail of signatures. He raised an eyebrow. Yours forged. Digital copies from old contracts. It's clever, but not clever enough. He leaned back, tapping his pen against his notebook. Then it's time to stop reacting and start leading. You said you wanted justice, not blood. Let's make it legal. I nodded. I'm listening. He laid out the plan with the precision of a general, 3 layers, each one tighter than the last. The first step, he said, is protection. We create a trust, call it the Harris Legacy Trust. You move all your assets into it, house savings, the remaining company shares. You remain the sole trustee while you're alive. If you're declared incompetent or die unexpectedly, the assets transfer directly to charity. No one else touches a cent. I sat back. If she tries to use power of attorney, she gets nothing. Exactly. He slid another document across the table. Second, we'll set a trap. A decoy investment account, the Northwest Renewal Fund. We'll put $200,000 into it from the trust. It'll look like part of your retirement portfolio. Lydia will think it's the last pile of money you haven't handed over. If she touches it, we'll have her. I could already see it, Lydia in her office, calculating eyes bright with greed. And the third, James smiled sharp and cold. The power of attorney papers she'll bring you next time, let's prepare our own. Identical format, but legally void. You'll sign them in front of her, make it look real, and she'll walk right into it. I laughed quietly. You always did enjoy a good twist. James poured coffee into 2 cups, sliding one toward me. This isn't about enjoyment, Ed. It's about control. You taught me that when we built this company. Control the paperwork, and you control the narrative. True, I said, staring into the black coffee. But this time, the narrative's my life. We spent the next 3 hours filling forms, calling bankers, notarizing signatures. James moved like a surgeon, never missing a step. By noon, the Harris Legacy Trust existed in full legal force. Everything I owned, down to the paintings in my hallway, now sat behind a wall of signatures no one could breach. As I prepared to leave, James looked up. "She's going to test you soon. She'll come back with her sweetest voice and her sharpest smile. Don't push back too hard. Make her think she's winning." I grinned. I built a company on that exact strategy. When I stepped out, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like mirrors. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt clear. Halfway home, my phone rang. "Nathan." "Dad." His voice sounded tight. "Lydia's worried. She said you've been calling lawyers?" "Old habit," I said easily. "Just updating some documents." "You know how it is at my age." There was silence on the other end. Then, "We just want to help Dad." "Of course," I said. "That's what family does." After a moment, he exhaled. "I'll stop by later, okay?" "Sure," I said, and ended the call before he could say more. That night, I sat in my study, the trust papers neatly stacked beside me. Outside, wind howled through the pines. The house felt too big for one man, but it was mine, built with every ounce of energy I'd ever had. I wasn't about to let anyone rewrite its story. The doorbell rang at 8. Nathan stood there with his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched. "Can we talk? Come in." He followed me to the living room. "Dad, Lydia says you're upset with us." I poured him tea, ignoring the lie. "Why would I be upset? You two are managing everything beautifully." He blinked, unsure if I was serious. "She's just trying to make things easier for you." "Easier?" I repeated softly. "That's what people always say before they take something that isn't theirs." Nathan frowned. "You think she's stealing from you? I think she's trying to protect herself. You might be helping without realizing it." He stood abruptly. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "But it's true." He clenched his jaw, then whispered, "She loves you, Dad. She just wants to make sure you're cared for." I let out a quiet laugh. "If she loves me, she's got a strange way of showing it. By the way, son, have you ever wondered why she never drinks the wine she pours?" He looked confused, almost offensive. "What are you saying?" "Nothing," I said. "Just be careful what you swallow." He left soon after, his footsteps echoing down the hall. When the door closed, I picked up my phone and dialed a number James had given me. Detective Simons, a woman's voice answered. "This is Edward Harris," I said. "My lawyer might have mentioned me." "Yes, Mr. Harris. He told me you may have a case of financial abuse." "Something like that," I replied, "but I want to make sure we do it right." Simons's tone grew firm. "Then let us monitor quietly. If your daughter-in-law tries to move assets, we'll have everything we need." "Good," I said. "I want her to hang herself with her own paperwork." "You sound calm about it." "Calm men build stronger traps." Over the next few days, James and I finalized everything. The decoy account was opened under my name, seeded with $200,000 from a safe source. Every transaction would flag immediately to his office and the detective's team. By Friday, the system was ready. Lydia wouldn't be able to resist. Greed has a scent, and I'd made sure she could smell it. That evening, I sat by the fire reviewing the last of the documents. The trust papers were perfect, notarized, dated. Every possible loophole she could exploit had been sealed shut. I poured myself a small drink and toasted the empty room. "To preparation," I murmured. The phone buzzed on the table. A text from Lydia. "We'd like to come by this weekend. We have some papers for you to review. Nothing urgent, just estate stuff. Love you, Dad?" I smiled at the screen. "Right on schedule." Before bed, I sent one final message to James. "Everything's in place. The fish is circling the hook." He replied instantly, then let her bite. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the floor. I leaned back in my chair, feeling that old familiar thrill, the one I used to get when closing a deal. Not anger, not vengeance, just control. Outside, the rain had turned back into snow, gentle flakes drifting against the window. I raised my glass toward the night. To wisdom, I said softly, and to those who mistake it for weakness. Then I took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through me. Tomorrow Lydia would bring her papers, and I would be ready to sign on my terms. The doorbell rang just after 10 in the morning. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. Lydia stood there in a cream-colored coat hair, perfectly curled, a binder clutched in her manicured hands. Nathan hovered behind her, his expression caught somewhere between guilt and resolve. "Morning, Dad," Lydia said brightly. "We brought some paperwork for you. Just estate planning, nothing serious." I stepped aside. "Come in, it's cold out there." They entered like salespeople's smiles, rehearsed eyes sharp. I led them to the dining room. The table was clear, except for a single pot of coffee and 3 cups. "Pour yourself some," I said. "We can talk while it's hot." Lydia sat first, opening her binder with a crisp click. The smell of her perfume mingled with the steam from the coffee, sickly sweet, like a mask. "We've been going over your accounts," she began, sliding a few papers across the table. "It's just getting complicated with taxes and all that. You shouldn't have to deal with this at your age." "At my age," I repeated softly, taking the papers. I keep hearing that phrase lately. Nathan cleared his throat. "She just means we want to help Dad. You've done so much already." I studied the document. Power of attorney. The top line read, "To grant full financial authority to Nathan and Lydia Harris." I turned another page, estate consolidation agreement. Perfect formatting, legal jargon, notarized signatures already waiting for mine. James had done an excellent job forging the decoy version to look identical. So I said, flipping to the last page, "If I sign this, you two handle everything." Lydia's smile widened. "Exactly. You won't have to worry about a thing." I nodded slowly, pretending to hesitate. "That does sound convenient." She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "You've earned peace, Edward. Let us take care of you." Her touch was soft, but her tone carried the faint edge of a knife. I smiled. "You know, Lydia, that's what my competitors used to tell me before they tried to buy me out." She froze for half a breath, then laughed lightly. "You and your jokes." Nathan leaned forward, voice low. "Dad, come on. This is good for everyone. You can focus on relaxing, maybe travel. We'll handle the business side." I let the silence stretch until it was almost uncomfortable. Then I said, "You're right. Maybe I've been holding on too tightly." Lydia blinked, surprised. "So? You'll sign?" I uncapped the pen she'd brought, of course it was gold, and signed both papers with careful precision. The fake versions, of course, already notarized by James, with a silent witness stamp. Lydia exhaled in visible relief. "There," she said, sliding the binder closed. "That's all it takes." I looked up. "And you'll keep me updated on everything, right?" "Of course," she said too quickly. "We'll make sure you're comfortable." I leaned back, folding my hands. "You're good at this. You'd have made an excellent negotiator." She tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean, convincing people to give up control while making them think it's their idea?" The smile faltered. Nathan stood restless. "We should get going. Lydia's got a meeting at the bank." "Right," she said, gathering her papers. When they left, I walked them to the door. "Drive safe," I said. Snow's melting roads are slick. Nathan hugged me stiffly. Lydia offered a perfumed cheek. As the car pulled away, I went straight to my office and turned on the camera feed. Through the window, I watched her in the passenger seat, phone already in hand. A moment later, a text pinged on my screen, forwarded automatically from the monitoring software James had installed. "Lydia, it's done. We control everything now." I smiled. "You control nothing." By afternoon, James called. "She moved faster than we thought," he said. Already contacting the bank to consolidate assets. Good, I said. The bait's working. Next step. Wait, I said. Let her walk deeper into the trap. I want her to think she's untouchable. That night I made myself dinner, a simple steak and potatoes, and ate in silence. The house felt strangely calm. I thought about Nathan, how he'd looked like a boy caught between two worlds. I wondered if he even realized how far Lydia had led him. At 9, my phone buzzed again. Nathan. Dad, he said quietly. I hope you're not mad. Lydia means well. We're just trying to make sure everything's secure. I know, I said. You've both done a lot for me. He hesitated. We'll come by again tomorrow. There's still a few details to handle. I'll be here. When the call ended, I poured myself a glass of wine. The same brand Lydia had tried to poison me with, though this bottle was clean bought fresh. I held the glass up to the light, watching the crimson ripple. She thought the signature on those papers gave her power. She didn't realize every word she'd seen was already nullified, replaced with James's counterversion, the one that gave her authority over a single dormant account with exactly $1 inside. The house creaked softly as wind brushed against the windows. I opened my journal, writing under the last entry, Phase 4, let them think it's finished. The next morning, a soft knock came at the door. Lydia stood there again, this time alone. She carried a small box wrapped in gold paper. A little thank you, she said sweetly, for trusting us. I accepted it. That's thoughtful of you. It's just a watch, she said, stepping closer. Nathan wanted you to have something special. I peeled the wrapping slowly. Inside was a sleek gold watch, brand new, the face glinting under the light. Beautiful, I said. Where's Nathan busy? He's finalizing the transfers. Transfers? She smiled. Just the routine consolidation we discussed. It'll make taxes easier next year. I nodded. Of course. Her eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. I should go. The bank closes early on weekends. Take your time, I said. No rush. When she left, I placed the watch back in its box. My phone buzzed another alert from the decoy account. Lydia had accessed the Northwest Renewal Fund. The withdrawal attempt logged under her credentials. I sent James a message, she's in, pull the data. He replied, got it. Screenshot saved, she's cooked. That night, Nathan came by again, trying to act casual. Lydia said she dropped off your gift. You like it? I do, I said. Though it's a little heavy. Expensive gift for a man who just gave away everything. He chuckled awkwardly. You deserve it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said quietly, Son, when you were a kid, you told me you'd build something bigger than I ever did. Remember that? He nodded. Sure, then don't build it on lies. They don't last. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing you don't already know, I said. He left a few minutes later, confusion written all over his face. I watched from the window as he stood outside making a phone call. Lydia again, no doubt. By midnight, I got another message from James. Detective Simons is in position. Everything's recorded. We'll move soon. I closed my laptop, shut off the lights, and poured myself one last glass of wine. The night was quiet, peaceful in a way only control could bring. From the upstairs window, I could see Lydia's car parked at the corner, headlights off. Waiting, watching. Maybe she thought she was guarding her new empire. I raised my glass toward her unseen silhouette and whispered, Sleep well, Lydia. You've earned it. Then I turned away, leaving the curtains half open so she could see the light flicker out. The trap was set. The game was hers to lose. 3 days later, the snow returned, soft flakes that floated through the gray Seattle air, falling slow and quiet like the calm before a verdict. I sat in my office, blinds half drawn, the monitors glowing faintly in the dim light. The cameras hummed to life one by one. Kitchen, driveway, study, front hall. Every corner of the house was visible from that desk. I'd built this home like a fortress. Now it finally served its purpose. At exactly 9:17 a.m., a message popped up from James Porter. The decoy account is live. Let's see who bites first. I smiled faintly. Let the games begin, I murmured. On the kitchen camera, Lydia appeared in her home office, hair perfectly pinned, sipping coffee while her laptop booted. She looked like any businesswoman starting her morning, except her entire empire rested on stolen foundations. I watched as she typed, quickly switching between spreadsheets and her private banking portal. A minute later, a second alert pinged on my screen. Login attempt detected, IP 192.161.224.48. That was her. She had just entered the Northwest Renewal Fund. I leaned back, folded my hands, and waited. She scrolled through the balance, $200,000, waiting like bait in a trap. Her mouth moved slightly, a whisper I couldn't hear, but I could guess the words, finally. She hesitated, then clicked transfer funds. Got you, I whispered. At James's office, the alert triggered automatically, recording her credentials and timestamp, the digital equivalent of fingerprints on the murder weapon. Lydia didn't stop there. Within minutes, she began moving small amounts into Northland Consulting LLC, her ghost company. The camera caught her smirk as the progress bar filled. By the time she shut her laptop, she'd transferred $50,000. James texted again. First bite confirmed. Everything logged. Want to move to phase 2? Not yet, I thought. Aloud, I said, let her think she's winning. That afternoon, Nathan dropped by with his usual uneasy smile. Hey, Dad, he said, rubbing his neck. Just checking in? Lydia's working on the year-end finances. I'm sure she is, I said. He sat down across from me, fidgeting with his watch. You've been quiet lately, thinking, I said. About family, about legacy. He nodded, pretending to understand. I just want you to know we're doing what's best for you. Of course, I said evenly. Tell me, Nathan, when Lydia talks about handling everything. What does that include? He frowned. You're reading too much into that. I've spent my life reading between lines, I said. It's where the truth hides. He sighed. You always think the worst of people. No, I said, meeting his eyes. I just know what people do when they want something they haven't earned. He stood up, frustrated. I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying. Try harder, I said softly. When he left, I returned to my desk. The snow outside had thickened, erasing the world beyond my driveway. I opened the security feed again. Lydia was pacing her kitchen on the phone. Her voice came through faintly on the microphone. Yes, the transfer went through. I'll move the rest tomorrow once the account verification clears. She paused, then laughed. No, he hasn't suspected a thing. He signed everything himself. It's all legal. My fingers tightened around my pen. She was bold now, too bold. Greed always made people talk too much. At 7 that evening, James called. Detective Simons has the logs. We can move any time. Not yet, I said. I want her to walk one step further. You're cutting it close, he warned. I've been walking that line all my life. The next morning, I watched Lydia again. This time, Nathan stood beside her, both of them staring at the computer screen. Lydia pointed to something, speaking fast. Nathan looked uneasy. I turned up the volume. 50,000's not enough, she said sharply. We'll need at least 100 before month end. Once he's moved to Sunset Haven, access will be harder. Lydia, we should slow down, Nathan said quietly. If Dad finds out, he won't, she snapped. He signed everything. And if he gets suspicious, we'll have the doctor back it up. The doctor. So they'd already contacted someone to declare me unfit. I hit record and sat very still as she continued. By the time he realizes anything, the accounts will be empty. Then he can rest, forever if necessary. There it was, the poison without the bottle. When the conversation ended, I copied the footage, encrypted it, and sent it to James. 10 minutes later, he called back. "This is enough for a warrant. We're ready." "Not yet," I said again. "Tonight she's coming here. Let me finish this my way." At dusk, Lydia texted, "We're stopping by after dinner. There's one more form we need you to sign." "Shouldn't take long," I replied. "I'll have the wine ready." I made sure the cameras were rolling in every room. I replaced the batteries in the kitchen mic, angled one toward the table. The house glowed softly under the Christmas lights. I'd left up a perfect scene for a family evening, or an arrest. When the doorbell rang, I moved slow, steady. Lydia entered first, wearing red, this time fitting. Nathan followed, pale and silent. Dad Lydia said, her tone rehearsed and bright. "We just need a couple more signatures. Routine stuff." "Of course," I said. "Sit down. Let's make it official." I uncorked a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. "You poured mine last time," I said lightly. "Let me return the favor." She hesitated, then gave a small laugh. "You remembered." I set the glass before her and one before myself. "To family," I said. She raised hers, took a small sip. Nathan didn't move. He looked from me to her, something dawning behind his eyes. I smiled. "Don't worry, it's not poisoned, but your plans are." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Lydia's face froze. "What are you talking about?" "Northland Consulting," I said calmly. "The shell accounts? The transfers? The forged signatures?" Her eyes widened. "You have no proof." "Actually," I said, tapping the side of my laptop, "I have everything." The kitchen camera's red light blinked softly above her shoulder. "You were right about one thing," I continued. "It's better to let the young handle things. You've handled this beautifully, handled it straight into a police case." Nathan stood abruptly. "Dad, please," I held up a hand. "Sit down, son. You need to hear this." He sat. Lydia didn't move. Her knuckles whitened around the stem of her glass. "I built Harris & Sons by trusting no one who smiled too easily," I said. "You thought you were clever, Lydia. But clever isn't wise." Her voice broke. "You set me up." I smiled faintly. "No, you set yourself up. I just left the door open." Before she could respond, headlights flashed through the window, 2 cars pulling into the driveway. Lydia's face drained of color. "What did you do?" she whispered. "Invited company," I said. A knock echoed at the door. Detective Simon's voice came through calm and firm. "Mrs. Harris, please step outside." Lydia's chair scraped back violently. "You can't do this." Nathan just stared at me, eyes wide with shock. Simons entered, badge flashing. "We have a warrant for financial fraud and attempted murder." Lydia turned to Nathan, desperate. "Say something. Tell them this is insane." But Nathan didn't. He just sat there trembling. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Lydia looked at me with something between hatred and disbelief. "You think you've won," she hissed. I leaned forward, voice low. "I didn't win, Lydia. I survived." She glared at me, eyes full of venom, and the officers led her out into the snow. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. Then Nathan whispered, "Dad, what have we done?" I looked at him, the anger in me cooling into something heavier, sorrow. "What you do now," I said, "is decide what kind of man you're going to be." He lowered his head, silent. Through the window, I watched the red and blue lights fade down the street. The snow kept falling quiet and clean. On the counter, Lydia's untouched wine glass caught the glow from the Christmas lights. I picked it up, turned it slowly in my hand, and whispered, "You poured mine once. Now it's over." I poured the wine down the sink, rinsed the glass, and set it upside down to dry. The game was finished. Outside, the snow covered the footprints leading away from my door. The next morning, the snow had stopped leaving the city, covered in a hard, quiet brightness. The kind of silence that follows a storm when everything looks clean, but nothing really is. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the police tape flutter faintly across my driveway. Lydia's footprints were gone now, buried under a thin crust of ice. Only the echo of her voice lingered in the house, sharp and poisonous. Down the hall, my phone buzzed. A message from James Porter Detective Simons confirmed it. She confessed to the transfers. The rest is paperwork now. Paperwork. That word always made me smile. Paperwork had built my empire, and last night it had destroyed hers. Still, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Lydia might have been in custody, but the rot in my family hadn't been cut out. Not until I faced Nathan. By 10, there was a knock on the door. I didn't have to check the camera feed to know who it was. Nathan stood there, coat unzipped, hair disheveled, eyes red from a sleepless night. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked straight in. "You called the police," he said. His voice was hoarse, trembling somewhere between fury and disbelief. "You had her arrested." "She had herself arrested," I said. "I just gave her the pen to sign the confession." "Dad, you set her up?" I sipped my coffee. "Did I?" He slammed his fist against the table. "You could have talked to me. You could have told me what you were doing instead of making a circus out of our lives." I met his gaze. "Would you have believed me?" Nathan looked away. "She said you were paranoid, that you were seeing things that weren't there." "And you believed her?" I said softly, because it was easier than admitting what she was. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear, I thought she just wanted to help. She wanted everything I said. And she almost got it." He dropped into a chair, rubbing his face. "They're saying she forged documents, that she tried to poison you." "Is that true?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I poured him a cup of coffee and set it down in front of him. "You were there that night. You saw her pour the wine." He shook his head slowly. "No. No, she wouldn't." "She would," I said, "and she did. But it wasn't my glass she drank from, was it?" Nathan looked up, eyes wide. The realization hit him like a wave. "Jesus Christ." "Don't take his name in vain, son," I said quietly. "He wasn't the one who married her." He buried his face in his hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The house creaked in the cold, the old wood shifting under the weight of everything that had happened. Finally, Nathan whispered, "What happens now, Justice?" I said. "Real justice." That afternoon, I met James at his office. He was already waiting, documents spread out neatly on the desk, the kind of battlefield I understood best. "Everything's locked in," he said. "The trust is solid, the assets protected. You could retire on an island and never worry again." I shook my head. "I'm not leaving. I built this house, this company, this family. I'm not running from what's left of it." James hesitated, then handed me a folder. "There's one more thing. Lydia's lawyer filed an emergency claim for joint ownership of company assets before the arrest. It's not legally valid, but it could muddy things." "Then let's clean it up," I said. We went through each page line by line, highlighting every false statement, every forged signature. It was like dismantling a bomb, one wire at a time. When we were finished, I felt lighter, tired, but clear. James leaned back. "You could press charges for attempted murder, Ed. They'd stick." I looked out the window. I don't need her in prison forever. I just need her out of my life. She'll lose everything he said. She already did, I replied. When I got home, Nathan's car was gone. The house felt hollow again, but peaceful this time. I poured myself a drink, sat in the armchair by the fire, and watched the flames curl around the logs. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for someone to knock to steal to smile while scheming. The doorbell rang anyway. I sighed and stood. Through the camera feed, I saw a face I didn't expect. Helen Peterson, Lydia's mother. I opened the door. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a heavy coat, eyes sunken but alert. "Sarah told me what happened," she said softly. "She's been difficult, I know." "She tried to kill me, Helen," I said. "That's more than difficult," Helen nodded slowly. "And she almost killed me too, remember? That night at your Christmas dinner," I studied her face. "You remember that?" Her mouth twitched, bits of it. Enough to know she poured something into that glass. We sat in the living room. She looked around the house with an expression somewhere between sorrow and shame. "I don't know how she turned into this," Helen whispered. "I didn't raise her to be cruel." "Cruelty grows quietly," I said, "usually when people stop calling it by name." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I wanted to come here to thank you." "For what?" "For saving me. And for not letting her win." I stared into the fire. "Winning doesn't feel the way I thought it would." She gave me a sad smile. "It rarely does." When she left, I stood by the door watching her walk down the driveway, her figure small against the pale snow. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her. Just pity for both of us. That night, I met with Detective Simons one final time. We sat in her car outside my house, the heater humming softly. "It's official," she said. "Lydia's charged with financial fraud, forgery, and attempted murder. She'll be held without bail until the trial." I nodded. "And my son, he's cooperating. He won't face charges as long as he testifies honestly." I let out a slow breath. "Then let's be done with it." She handed me a business card. "If you need protection, we can set up patrols. You've made enemies, Mr. Harris." I smiled faintly. "I've been making enemies since 1978. It's how I know I'm doing something right." When she drove away, I went back inside and poured one last drink. The house was silent again, but this time the silence felt deserved, earned. On my desk lay two folders, one labeled the Harris Legacy Trust, the other the Renewal Fund case. The first was everything I wanted to keep, the second everything I'd survived. I placed them side by side, tied them with a ribbon, and locked them away. Before bed, I stood at the window, watching the snow glitter faintly under the streetlights. In the distance, I could see the city skyline, my skyline still standing, still mine. I whispered to the night, "You played well, Lydia. But I've been playing longer." Then I closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and let the house rest. The trap had sprung. The war was over. And for the first time in years, I slept without checking the locks. The night after Lydia's arrest, the house was too quiet. No sound of footsteps on the stairs. No smell of her expensive perfume hanging in the air. Just silence, heavy and clean, like the calm after an explosion. I sat by the fire with a half-empty glass of whiskey, the only light flickering against the photographs on the wall, old family pictures that now looked like evidence. A knock came at the door. 3 short taps, hesitant. I knew who it was. Nathan stood outside, drenched from the cold rain, eyes red. His voice cracked. "Dad, what have you done?" I stepped aside without a word. He walked in, dripping onto the hardwood floor, clutching his jacket like it was armor. "They took her," he said. "Lydia's in jail. They said it was you who reported everything." I poured another glass and handed it to him. "Sit down, Nathan." He didn't move. "You could have talked to me first. You didn't have to humiliate her like that." "She humiliated herself," I said evenly. "She forged my signature, stole from my company, and tried to poison me at Christmas dinner. I don't owe her a conversation." "That's not true," he shouted, the glass trembling in his hand. She said you were losing your mind, that you were paranoid, that you... Think, I said sharply. You were there that night. You saw her pour my wine. You saw me switch the glasses. He froze. His face paled. What are you talking about? She didn't drink from her own glass, Nathan. She drank from mine. And 5 minutes later, her mother hit the floor, foaming at the mouth. He staggered backward, shaking his head. No, she told me it was a reaction to her medication. Did the doctors agree? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. His voice broke instead. You set her up. I let her set herself up, I said. You just refused to see it. Nathan sank into the chair opposite mine, burying his face in his hands. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind against the windows. Then softly he said, She said she loved you, Dad. She said she just wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Love doesn't empty your accounts or put poison in your glass, I said. That's not care, that's calculation. He looked up, eyes glistening. You could have told me earlier. You could have warned me. I did, I said. Every time I tried, you defended her. Nathan's shoulders sagged. He stared at the fire, eyes hollow. I thought you were just bitter. No, I said quietly. I was being careful. He took a shaky breath. What happens now? The investigation moves forward. The truth comes out. His voice cracked. And what about me? I studied his face. That depends on what you did, Nathan. He swallowed hard. I didn't know about the poison, I swear. She said it was just paperwork, investments, reorganizing the company. I signed what she told me to. I didn't want to disappoint her. You didn't disappoint her, I said. You obeyed her. There's a difference. He clenched his fists. You don't understand. She said you'd built everything for yourself, that you didn't trust me, that you'd never let me have a part of it. And you believed her. She made it sound so reasonable, he said, like she was fighting for us. I nodded slowly. She fought for herself, Nathan. You were just her weapon. He covered his face, shoulders shaking. God, what have I done? I let the silence stretch, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Truth needs quiet to settle in. Finally, I said, you've got a choice to make now. You can keep pretending you didn't know, or you can start making things right. He looked up. How? By telling the truth, I said. In court. To the detectives. And to yourself. Nathan nodded weakly, eyes full of shame. They said she'll be charged with attempted murder and fraud. She will, I said. He stared at the fire again. She was my wife. And my would-be killer, I replied. You'll have to decide which truth matters more. He didn't argue. He just sat there staring at the flames until they burned low. When I finally stood to add another log, he whispered, What are... The courthouse smelled of dust and old paper. The kind of air that carried other people's stories, failures, betrayals, the slow grind of justice. I sat quietly in the second row, my cane resting against my knee, watching the attorneys shuffle documents. The sign on the door read, State of Washington versus Lydia Harris. It was strange seeing my own last name on both sides of the aisle. The bailiff called order. Lydia was led in by 2 deputies, wrists cuffed chin high. She was wearing a beige suit, not the bright colors she loved so much. Her hair was tied back, her smile brittle and fixed. For a moment our eyes met. She looked at me not with guilt or shame, but with disbelief, like she still couldn't understand how I'd beaten her. Across the courtroom, Nathan sat hunched forward, hands clasped. His face was pale drawn. When I'd asked him to testify, he hadn't hesitated. but I could see the weight of it pressing on him now. Judge Harmon entered the courtroom. Rose then settled. The prosecutor began, voice calm, deliberate, factual. The defendant, Lydia Harris, is charged with attempted murder, financial fraud, and falsification of legal documents. The state will prove she systematically conspired to seize the assets of her father-in-law, Edward Harris, by rendering him incompetent through forgery, poisoning, and manipulation. I'd heard those words before, but they still hit me like stones dropped in still water. Each one sank deep. When it was the defense's turn, Lydia's attorney stood and painted me as an aging man in decline. Mr. Harris has a history of paranoia regarding his finances, he said. The alleged poisoning was a tragic accident. Our client mixed up glasses while pouring wine at Christmas dinner. The so-called financial fraud was nothing more than routine estate management misunderstood by an elderly man struggling with control. I almost smiled. The words were clean, rehearsed, and wrong. Then came the moment that changed everything. The prosecutor nodded to the bailiff, who wheeled in a large screen. He pressed play. The video flickered to life, the recording from my kitchen camera. Lydia at the counter, glancing over her shoulder, pulling a small vial from her purse. The sound was faint, but clear. "He's calmer than I expected," she whispered. "Good. The less he questions things, the faster we can finalize the transfer." Nathan's voice followed. "What if he finds out?" Lydia laughed softly. "Then he'll be too confused to do anything about it." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lydia's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection," overruled, the judge said. I watched Lydia's face as the video kept playing, showing her pouring the liquid into my glass. When the image froze on her hand holding the vial, she finally looked down, her confidence cracking. The prosecutor turned toward the jury. Mr. Harris didn't imagine this. He didn't hallucinate. He prepared. He survived. Then he called me to the stand. I stood slowly, gripping the cane more for effect than need, and took the oath. The courtroom lights were hot on my face. "Mr. Harris," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us what happened that evening?" I told them everything. The dinner, the wine, the way Lydia smiled when she thought I wasn't watching, how I'd switched the glasses, the chaos that followed, the hospital, the trust, the plan. When I finished, the room was silent. The defense attorney approached, trying for sympathy. "Mr. Harris, you're 70, correct? 68. "Close enough," he said, smiling like he'd made a joke. "Do you take medication for memory or cognitive issues?" I shook my head. "No. But thank you for your concern." He tried again. "You admit, then, that you installed cameras in your home to spy on your family?" "I installed cameras," I said evenly, "to keep thieves from taking what I'd built. It turns out I was right to do so." He hesitated. "You seem angry, Mr. Harris." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm not angry. I'm awake." The judge rapped his gavel once for order. By the afternoon, the prosecutor introduced more evidence: bank records, forged signatures, email chains Lydia had thought she deleted. Piece by piece, the story came together: the fake companies, the stolen funds, the life insurance policy. Each exhibit tightened the noose around her ambition. When Nathan was called, he looked like a man walking to his own sentencing. He confirmed the conversations, the financial plans, the doctor's visits Lydia had arranged to have me declared incompetent. When he finished, he didn't look at her. Lydia sat stiffly, her nails digging into the table. For the first time, she looked afraid. The trial stretched into the next morning. By the time the jury returned, the air in the courtroom was brittle, ready to break. The foreman stood. "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of financial fraud, guilty. On the charge of document falsification, guilty." The words fell like a gavel of their own. Lydia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nathan closed his eyes. Judge Harmon's voice was steady. Mrs. Harris, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in the Washington Correctional Facility, with eligibility for parole after 10. Restitution of $480,000 is ordered to the estate of Edward Harris. Court adjourned. The deputies moved toward her. Lydia turned once, meeting my eyes. You destroyed us, she hissed. I rose slowly. You destroyed yourself. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, microphones lunging forward. Mr. Harris, how does it feel to win? I paused on the courthouse steps, looking up at the gray sky. Justice isn't about winning, I said. It's about remembering what's worth protecting. James stood off to the side, smiling faintly. You handled that like a statesman. I've been handling snakes my whole life, I said. This one just happened to marry my son. We walked together to the curb where my car waited. Nathan followed a few steps behind, silent. When we reached the car, he stopped. Dad, I'm sorry. I looked at him for a long moment. I know. Now do something better with the rest of your life. He nodded, tears threatening, and walked away. Back home, the house was quiet again. The police tape had been removed, the cameras turned off. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I poured myself a drink and sat by the window. Snow had started falling again, thin, steady, unending. The kind of snow that covered everything ugly and made it look clean for a little while. In the reflection, I saw the old man I'd become, slower maybe, but still sharp enough to see the world for what it was. I raised the glass and whispered, "To justice." Served cold, but served well. The fire crackled. The snow thickened. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. I finished my drink and set it down carefully on the table. The game was over. This time the silence was mine. A month after the trial, the world had gone strangely quiet. The headlines had faded, the cameras stopped calling, and the only sound in my house was the hum of the heater pushing against the winter cold. I woke before dawn every day out of habit more than need. And found myself walking the halls like a man counting the echoes of his own past. The house felt bigger now, emptier, like it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. I poured coffee black and strong and sat by the window that overlooked the front yard. The snow was melting, patches of brown grass showing through like scars. The driveway was clear again, no more police tape, no more reporters, no more shadows parked at the corner pretending to be neighbors. It was over. Or at least that's what everyone kept saying. James called that morning as he always did. "You sound awake," he said. "I am," I answered, "just not sure what to do with it." He laughed quietly. "You could try resting. You've earned it. Resting feels too much like dying," I said. "And I've had enough close calls for one lifetime." He paused. "Then start something new. Make the aftermath count for something." That stayed with me long after we hung up. I spent the rest of the morning going through old boxes, blueprints from the early days of Harris & Sons, handwritten notes from the first big project I'd ever won. My signature was bold back then, a little arrogant. I smiled. I'd built an empire out of concrete and discipline, and for a while I'd almost let family tear it down faster than time ever could. At noon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Nathan stood there. His coat looked too big for him now. His shoulders had lost their confidence. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Always," I said. He followed me to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. I poured him a cup, slid it across the table. He didn't touch it right away. "I got a job," he said finally. "Small firm downtown. Junior architect position." I smiled. "Back to the beginning then?" He nodded. "It's strange starting over at 40. It's not strange, I said. It's honest. We sat in silence for a while. The clock ticked softly on the wall. She's in prison, he said quietly. I know. They let her call me once. I didn't answer. That was smart. He looked at me, guilt flickering in his eyes. Do you ever think about her? Every day, I said. But not the way you think. I don't replay what she did. I think about the woman who could have been, if greed hadn't eaten her alive. Nathan lowered his gaze. She fooled me. She fooled a lot of people, I said. But you're still here. You learned. He nodded slowly. I want to make things right, Dad. I don't know how, but I will. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. Then that's enough for me. When he left, I felt something unclench in my chest, something that had been knotted there for months. Forgiveness didn't come easy, but maybe that was the point. That afternoon, I went into the study and opened the safe behind the bookshelf. Inside were 2 envelopes. One was labeled Harris Legacy Trust, the other, to be opened by Emma. My granddaughter. I smiled at the thought of her, 16 now, smart, curious, untainted by all this mess. She'd written me letters during the trial pages filled with teenage sincerity. Grandpa, I believe you. Don't let them take your company. Love, Emma. Last week she'd sent another one. I made honor roll. I got into a pre-law summer program at Northwestern. Maybe I'll help people like you someday. I'd frame that one. The phone rang again that evening. This time it wasn't James. It was Laura Chen, the young accountant who'd risked her job to tell me the truth. Mr. Harris, I heard about the verdict, she said. I just wanted to thank you for standing up for yourself. It gave the rest of us hope. Hope for what I asked. That honesty still matters in business. I laughed softly. It always has, Laura. People just forget until they get burned. She paused. What will you do now? Build something that lasts, I said, not in concrete this time in people. The next morning, I met James downtown. We went over the final details of the foundation paperwork. The Harris Foundation, he read aloud, smiling. Funds for trade education, apprenticeships, and rebuilding local housing. It's about giving second chances, I said, for people who still want to work for something real. He nodded. You really are turning this into a legacy. Legacy isn't money, I said. It's what survives after people stop saying your name. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Days turned into weeks. The house grew warmer, lighter. The neighbors started waving again. One morning I found a small envelope in the mailbox, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single folded page. Grandpa Mom said awful things about you for years, but I know now they weren't true. Thank you for protecting our family even from ourselves. I can't wait to see you this summer. Love, Emma. I read it 3 times before setting it on my desk. Then I picked up my pen and wrote back, Dear Emma, you're the best part of all this. Remember, strength isn't how hard you fight, it's how long you stand for what's right. I'll see you soon. I sealed the envelope and placed it by the door for mailing. That evening, as the sun sank low behind the fir trees, I walked outside. The air smelled of thawed earth and rain, the first real hint of spring. The sky glowed gold over the rooftops, and for the first time in a long time, I felt small in a good way. The world didn't owe me peace. It simply offered it, and for once, I accepted. I went back inside, lit the fire, and poured a glass of wine. The same brand as before, Pinot Noir, clean this time, untouched by deception. I took a slow sip, let the warmth spread. When the clock chimed 8, I opened my leather-bound journal to the last blank page and wrote January 14th. Aftermath complete. Justice done. Legacy in motion. I hesitated, then added one last line beneath it, peace earned. I closed the journal, set it beside the fire, and leaned back in the armchair. The flames danced across the glass, reflected in the window, where my own faint reflection stared back a little older, a little lonelier, but still standing. Outside, the wind carried the smell of pine through the open vent, mingling with the scent of old wood and smoke. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I still had. Maybe that was the point of surviving, not to win, not to outlive your enemies, but to sit in the quiet afterward and know you didn't lose yourself in the process. I raised my glass one final time. To honesty, I said softly, and to starting again. Then I drank and let the night finally rest. A year passed and Christmas came quietly this time. No champagne, no guests, no hollow laughter echoing against polished glass. Just the soft crackle of the fire, the glow of white lights twined around the old pine tree, and the faint sound of carols from the radio. Outside, the snow fell in slow, lazy spirals, gentler than last year, kinder somehow. I set the dining table myself. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 1 candle flickering between them. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air. This was what peace smelled like. The doorbell rang at 6. Nathan stood there with his daughter beside him, both carrying gifts wrapped in plain brown paper. No pretense, no extravagance, just warmth. "Merry Christmas, Dad," Nathan said quietly. "Merry Christmas, son," I replied. Emma rushed forward and hugged me tight. "Grandpa, it smells amazing in here." "Wait until you taste it," I said, laughing softly as she slipped off her coat and darted toward the tree. The living room glowed in the soft orange light of the fire. She stared at the ornaments, each one different collected over decades, and smiled at the one near the top, a small wooden hammer carved by Nathan when he was 10. "You kept it," she said. "I keep what's honest," I answered. We sat down to dinner, the 3 of us. The clinking of forks and the murmur of small talk filled the air where once there had been tension and deceit. Nathan looked across the table at me, the candlelight reflecting in his tired eyes. "I didn't think we'd have another Christmas like this," he said. I poured him wine, sweet red and safe this time. Neither did I. But sometimes peace finds its way back home. Emma lifted her glass of cider. "To family," she said brightly. "To family," I echoed. Nathan hesitated before clinking his glass against mine. His hand trembled slightly, but his smile was real. After dinner, while Emma arranged her gifts under the tree, Nathan helped me wash the dishes. For a while, we worked in silence, the soft scrape of plates and the hum of the radio our only soundtrack. Then he spoke. "She wrote again," he said quietly. I didn't need to ask who. "What did she say?" "She's different." Angry, confused. "I think prison's changing her. It always does," I said. "Some people find themselves there. Some just dig deeper." He nodded. "She asked about Emma. I haven't told her anything. I figured the less she knows, the better." "That's wise," I said. He turned off the tap, drying his hands, slowly. "Do you ever regret it?" How everything ended, I took a long breath, watching the steam rise from the sink. Regret's a luxury I can't afford. I don't regret what I did. I regret that it had to be done. Nathan nodded, eyes wet. "I still love her, you know. I hate what she did, but I can't erase what we had." "I know," I said softly. "That's the hardest part of surviving betrayal. You remember the good moments, even when you shouldn't." He looked at me for a long time, then said, "I'm proud of you, Dad." I smiled faintly. "You've got it backwards, son. I'm proud of you." When he left later that night, Emma stayed behind for a moment. She handed me a small package wrapped in silver paper and tied with a string. "I made you something," she said. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a hand-carved wooden plaque. Burned into the center were the words, "Built on Truth." I ran my fingers over the letters, the edges rough and uneven, made by young hands that still believed in simple things. "It's perfect," I said, my voice catching. She beamed. "Can we hang it next to the fireplace?" "Of course," I said. She helped me hammer the nail, her small fingers guiding the wood into place. When she stepped back, she grinned. "Now it feels like home again." I kissed her forehead. "It does?" She looked up at me. "Grandpa, will we always have Christmas like this?" "As long as we remember why we're here," I said. "As long as we tell the truth, even when it's hard." She nodded solemnly, as if I'd just told her the secret to life. Maybe I had. After Nathan and Emma left, the house was quiet again. I sat by the fire with a cup of coffee, watching the flames dance and twist. The plaque caught the light, the words glowing faintly like a promise. Outside, snow blanketed the street, soft and untouched. I thought about last Christmas, the poisoned wine, the lies, the moment Lydia's mask finally cracked. How close I'd come to losing everything. And now, 1 year later, I sat in the same chair, the same house, alive, free at peace. I lifted my cup toward the window, as if toasting the ghost of what was. "You see, Lydia," I said quietly, "you taught me that even betrayal can build something stronger if you survive it." The fire popped sparks, shooting upward, fading before they reached the chimney. I leaned back and let the warmth fill the room. On the mantel above the fire sat a framed photo, me, Nathan, and Emma from earlier that evening. I'd asked her to set the timer on my old camera. It wasn't perfect, slightly blurry too close, but the smiles were real. That was enough. At 9 o'clock, I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of the tree and the embers of the fire. The house looked softer this way, wrapped in gold and quiet. I took my leather-bound journal from the shelf, open to the last page, and wrote December 25th, 1 year later. The wine is sweet. The house is quiet. The story is mine again. I paused, then added one final line. Sometimes revenge is just another word for justice. And justice, when it's done right, tastes a lot like peace. I closed the journal, set it beside my chair, and looked into the fire one last time before it died down to a soft, glowing red. Outside, a fresh layer of snow began to fall, covering the world in silence. I whispered to the empty room, "Merry Christmas," and smiled. And as the embers faded, I knew that for the first time in years, I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear, and everything left to live for. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Tell me, would you have forgiven or fought back? Leave your thoughts below. And don't forget to share this with someone who believes that the truth, no matter how late, is always worth defending. Because in the end, peace isn't given, it's earned. And I've earned mine.